Well, elsewhere this evening, a tenant has told BBC Scotland how he was confronted with a chair during a row over withheld rent payments. Jason Chen took a secret video recording of the incident where a man he believes was his landlord is seen waving a stool during a dispute over the Edinburgh property going without hot water for 28 days. Andrew Picken has this story.
All the people here.
I'll put everyone out. I couldn't care less. If it's not paid, everything will be turned off in the flat tonight. There'll be no electric, there'll be no heating, there'll be no gas.
This man is speaking to tenant Jason Chen in his Edinburgh flat. The row is about Jason withholding some of his rent after the flat went 28 days without hot water. Jason believes the man in the video is flat owner and controversial businessman Mark Fortune.
There will come a point where you and I won't be very amicable to you. Okay? The likes of this, okay? You know what I mean? It's,
Okay.
You can Google me.
The police are investigating the incident, but Mr. Fortune says it's not him in the video. He says he was in a dental surgery in Cannes in the south of France at the time, but Jason believes it was Mr. Fortune he was dealing with.
I text him and message him every day, and he always said he will find someone to fix today or tomorrow, but he's just like wasting time.
Anybody who does search for Mr. Fortune on the internet will find stories about the state of the flats he owns and the way people living in them are treated. When the man Jason believes to be Mr. Fortune walked into his flat, he secretly hit record on his phone.
You're saying, fix the electric and you'll pay. You'll pay, or I will throw all your stuff in the street.
I never expect someone will just show in my room in person. So I would say it was my first time meeting people like really so aggressive to me, so I was quite nervous.
Jason also received a number of messages from Mr. Fortune's company which he felt were threatening. He says he was told to pay up or face being evicted from the city centre flat.
I think I have no choice. At that time I just feel very stressed and no one can really help me. So my decision is I still pay the rent for this month.
Mr. Fortune supplied evidence to the BBC which he says shows he was at a dental surgery in France on the day the video was recorded. The businessman says he's not a landlord and did not send any messages to Jason. Mr. Fortune also says he has reported Jason to the police for writing slogans about him on the walls of his room before he left the flat for good. Last month, Mr. Fortune saw 3 of his properties auctioned off as part of a bankruptcy claim against him to collect outstanding debts with the City of Edinburgh Council. Campaigners have welcomed the move, but say more needs to be done to support tenants.
I don't want to put too much weight on Mr. Fortune. I think that he's a very high-profile example of the kind of landlord that we deal with up and down the country, day in and day out. What we find is that we get lots and lots of pushback when we take actions to secure tenants' rights for them. So if we withhold rent or we take any steps to put pressure on them, they usually respond very aggressively.
Jason has now left the UK for his home country of Taiwan, but hopes sharing the video will help other tenants.
I just hope this video can help everyone like suffering like me, can help them to escape from Mark Fortune's hands, and we can just live like normal people.
You know what I mean? It's,
Okay.
You can Google me.
Well, Nick Durie is from the Scottish Tenants Organisation, which is an independent organisation supporting renters across the country. Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Some quite extraordinary footage there, and that was filmed in Edinburgh, where a housing emergency was declared just months ago. Is this something that you have a regular experience of? How often does something like that happen?
Well, unfortunately, it happens right across the board, and also in the social rented sector. So we deal with tenants who are giving door chaps. You know, the landlords will come and be aggressive and abusive towards social tenants. Happens in the private rented sector as well. But we see breaches of regulations constantly, where as a country we honour our regulations more in default than we do in action. And some of the recent decisions that the Scottish Government has made, for example, the rent freeze, subsequent rent cap, actually created a whole tranche of people who are living without rights, because the nature of that legislation was such that it only applies if there's no change in tenancy. So if you imagine in a house of multiple occupancy, somebody leaves, well, that person, if they're replaced by another tenant, technically what should happen is there should be a renegotiation of the contract. and people don't want to see massive rent rises, so they say, oh yeah, this person's still there. So the new person moves in, has no rights, no official tenancy, and that has grown and grown and grown. So the more action we see, ill thought out legislative action, the worse the position is Scotland. And we've seen the same with, with the eviction ban. That led to a slew of evictions across the social rented sector. So we need much better legislation, but we also need regulation that works. We have a regulator that was recommending the transfer of Reid Vale Housing Association, totally solvent, but at the same time does nothing for massive rise in damp and mould, which we know is against all the regulations.
So the tenant in this case, he was withholding rent because he hadn't had hot water for 28 days. Was he within his rights to do that?
Yes. If he placed that in a separate bank account, I mean, as long as he doesn't touch that money, then yes, it's within his rights. But nary a case will be found where that will be respected by a landlord, whether in the private rented sector or the social rented sector.
And Nick, you were talking about their loopholes in the rent freeze, well, the rent cap freeze. What protections are there in place for tenants then?
Well, I mean, at the moment we have the 3% cap, which doesn't apply to the social rented sector. So right across the social rented sector, and I must stress this point, the vast majority of tenants are in the social rented sector. So they've never been helped by the rent freeze and subsequent rent cap. But notionally, 3% if you continue in the same tenancy. But if you make any changes, then no, that doesn't count. That comes up to an end on the 1st of April, and then we're bringing in a situation where landlords can have 12% rent rises in the private rented sector, which is what we're seeing right now across the social rented sector. A lot of landlords pursuing 10%.
OK, Nick, thank you very much for your time and for your insight tonight. We really appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Cheers.